think the very beginning of a successful grow is to have intention, make a schedule that you can follow and adhere to. Growing is a perpetual thing. If a room runs long, it could really throw things off. So I think getting down to the basics is having a successful propagation program that leads to a successful veg program that finishes on time and is ready for the flower stage, and getting to flower that can finish on time. So that room can be efficiently harvested, reset, and everything can move through the system cyclically.
I'm going to take a slightly different angle because I think that's what I would want to hear if I were bringing you in as my head grower and just saying, hey, what are you thinking on building this thing out? And that's kind of music to my ears. From my perspective on the business side, I think people rush too quickly to, oh, it's all about the margins. And I think it starts with, are you able to build and have a facility that allows your team to achieve the results they want to get to, right? They don't want to fight the facility. They don't want to fight the process. Are they set up for success? So, asking a few questions along the way, obviously hearing what you just said, Sean, makes all the sense in the world. Because you're talking about everything. It's not just about the build out. You're looking at how you're going to populate those rooms and how you're going to cycle through those rooms and what your expectations are for those rooms in terms of the turns. How tall do you expect the plants to be? Why are we picking these strains? I think those are all critical aspects at the very outset, because otherwise you build a facility, you put a bunch of plants in, you see what happens, but then no one ever defined what success was. So I guess success in that world is, well, nothing died. But that's not really the true measure of success. It's, did you get, Sean, what you thought you were going to get when you planted that room? If not, is there anything I can do to help? Or was it just, all right, we picked a bad strain or something like that? And that's sort of the question I would always go into. We built this. Were you able to get what you wanted out of it, applying your knowledge and your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the infrastructure of the facility, the heating and cooling, and how those rooms behave, the airflow, those are going to impact your plants a lot. So really understanding how those vital components of your facility operate is going to be crucial, and being able to make the adjustments you can if needed, and how to work around them if you can.
And the adjustments are the key piece. I think there's a lot of data that the systems out there provide to you. A lot of people, right, the guys in the corner office always go right to the metric data to see what sold and how much did it sell for and what's the price per pound, and that's all well and good. But that doesn't happen unless you start right in the garden. That's one of the reasons why we ended up at an ancillary where we are right now, because after spending all that time as operators, we felt, where does everything start? How do we make sure that everyone gets a good, clean start, right? And we felt, well, everything has to grow in some kind of substrate. Everything has to be fed some kind of nutrient, whether you're going to turn that into world-class flour, whether you're going to send it out, and have it become distillate, doesn't really matter. It starts in the garden. Grow something really well, then you give the rest of your downstream team the most opportunity to turn it into whatever they want to turn it into, as opposed to, I grew something and, oh look, it's only 17%, it's got a terrible profile, I guess it's going to the lab. And I think we've both been part of organizations that has an overabundance of oil. The next 6 years, all the oil you could possibly need because everything was going straight to the lab. Well, that's not a successful grow. That's just literally, I grew this and this is what happened, oh well, let's start again. It's that intentional piece and the shifting on the fly, knowing what to do with the data. I think that's something that's starting to really evolve. There's a lot of people that see a lot of data, but sometimes, and we see this, I mean, you certainly see, you could probably talk about it, when you share some of that data with the people and then you're waiting to see, well, do they know what it means? I think you tend to see a little more than you might think you would see, that sort of blank stare. Like, I'm not sure I understand the cause and effect pieces of it. I know that number probably should be different, but I'm not 100% sure how to get it there, right? I mean, you interact with the growers all day.
Yeah, when it comes to data, the numbers don't lie. If you can minimize your water usage, for example, in your utilities because you're doing proper drybacks, well, that's a nice benefit. In turn, you're also pushing your plants further, maybe staying ahead of schedule on how long that room is actually running and how much it costs to run a flower cycle. In tandem with that, having a great bud structure, having great output, that's going to be a heck of a lot easier on the harvest team and the processing teams. You can get through your flower more quickly, command a bigger ticket, and have it sell faster.
Yeah, that's everything's got a downstream impact. Even if you're just growing raw flour for wholesale, there's a downstream impact that you need to pay attention to. And when everybody realizes they're on the same team, and no one team really sits above anybody else, I think that's when you see the most successful grows. Everybody's aligned, everyone's rowing in the same direction, and they get the joke for all intents and purposes. And also the egos tend to get checked. I think it's hard sometimes to have done something really successfully a certain way, or if you're a multi-state operator and it worked really well in this market and I got to this market, why am I struggling? I don't understand. And it's hard because you sometimes take it personally, and you shouldn't. Sometimes it's just the pure science. You're in a different environment. We sit here in Colorado, and in the summer, if you're growing in the summer, it's a totally different world than if you're growing in the winter. What you have to get out of your systems, and recognizing that even if it's an indoor grow, you can push those systems, but it's not going to be a exact replication. So you're going to have to adjust your processes a little bit. Don't be afraid to. Again, know what you're driving towards, right?
Yeah, exactly. Being dynamic in the situations, sometimes there's really obvious fixes right in front of your face that don't cost a whole lot of money. For example, one of our customers that I recently did a site visit for, they have one particular room that has heat issues. So went out there, working with the team, looking at the room, looking at the data, looking at their levels, and looking at their power and how they have to allocate that in their building. So the room with the biggest heat issues is on during the day, while the room without heat issues is on at night. And for their power supply and balance, they have to flip-flop that. So instead of having this on in the day, this on at night, we switch them around. The hotter room is on at night. It's a little bit of a break on the heavy equipment. It's better on the utility bill, and it's better for the plants.
Yeah, I think having that kind of selfless approach when looking at some of these things, I think just finding out, sometimes it's just by dumb luck, you find out, hey, a room just accidentally ran 5 degrees lower, but you got a better harvest that go around. Take a look at that and figure out why that is, because maybe you're onto something. We saw that, I think, as a firm with the whole flushing thing,
Yep.
where people were taking an extra week in flower that you really didn't need. At the end of the day, you're better off shortening up the cycle a little bit. So, being willing to shift on the fly, being willing to adapt, I think those are all critical pieces to building out a solid grow. At the end of the day, it's more than just the facility. And then I think when you talk about your inputs and all the different pieces, and look, you're going to be approached by so many different people. Try this substrate, try that nutrient, try this additive. It's pure fire. It's going to be amazing. I think you have to really look under the hood, look at your feed charts and see if it's really apples to apples. And don't try to change too many things at once. We see this all the time when people want to trial our products. They're trialing our cocoa while also trialing a bunch of nutrients, while also changing up the temperature, while also changing the light cycles, because they just updated to the latest LED lights. You've got no baseline at that point. You're just pushing on a balloon, and you're just, maybe you land on something out of dumb luck, but that doesn't necessarily mean you successfully navigated anything. It just happened to work out. So
I really couldn't think of a better point than when you just made, Gary. I could think of an example from years ago, and this is before I even knew what vapor pressure deficit was. But we had a room that was very consistent. Everything was always the same until we had some equipment not functioning how we wanted it to. We were pretty concerned about it, but we ran through the cycle. It turned out we actually had a better quality harvest than normal, tested a bit higher, and we had a few grams more per square foot. So we looked back and said, okay, let's look at the data.
Yep.
What's different? And we realized that our temperature and humidity fell into a nice sweet spot. And that sweet spot was being in the PPD range.
Yeah, know your plants, know your strains. I think that's probably the last piece. And I think you mentioned this earlier. When you do that strain selection, how it reacts to your environment, the things it's going to need, right? You're going to have to adjust. So having those good SOPs, being flexible, again, giving your staff agency too, so that they know what to look for when they're walking the floors. There's no substitute for all the monitors and everything. I just have never seen a substitute for having somebody at least walk and check the flower every now and then. You're not going to see everything. You're going to just catch things here and there, because you can monitor just about everything else. You can monitor soil, moisture, you can monitor, you name it. But just taking a look and giving it the eye test, right? And that's where the experience kicks in.
Yeah, absolutely. At one of the last shops we were with, I really made sure to walk the rooms every day, be in contact with the plants and the people and see what's going on. And one day I was going through the room when they were cutting clones, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was a technique I hadn't come across before. It was an estate with 25B where there was restrictions on different hormones you can use. And one of the technicians thought outside the box, asked the propagation manager if he could try something out. It was the best round of clones we put out. I couldn't believe it. I had to ask him what he did. I wrote it down. So you could have all the experience in the world and then pick up one of the best techniques from a from a technician that's still, learning the trade.
Yep. Yep. You're always learning.